You know, earlier today, I told my wife she said, "Are you going to be able to do whatever in the lawn today that I told her I would do on Thursday?" I was like, "Yeah, I'll do it on Thursday." She says, "Today's Thursday." I said, "No, it isn't. It's Wednesday." And I was actually right. And the truth is, none of us knows what day it is. But it turns out it's Wednesday, and we are tonight talking to my friend Barry Seidel. He did a session during the virtual event, and Barry, that is the loudest chair. You don't get to shift anymore. I'm sorry.
I will stay totally still
You
from now
have
on.
like, did you watch Downton Abbey, by the way? Did you see Downton Abbey?
I did
Oh my
no.
gosh, Downton Abbey is like the most important television event of my lifetime. I am such a nerd that we got excited about going to the movie. To the whole plot of the movie was that the house's boiler goes out. That's like the plot of the movie, and it still was so great. Anyway, in Downton Abbey, there's this moment where the crotchety grandma sits on a swivel chair in the lawyer's office, and she starts moving around, and she's like, "What?" He says, "What is?" She says, "What is this thing?" And he says, "Oh, it's an American swivel chair." And she says, "Why is it always the Americans that want to start a conflict?" And he says, "I'll get you another chair." And she says, "No, I'm a good sailor," and like sits in the anyway. I just love the "I'm a good sailor" line. Anyway, so a couple of quick announcements, guys, and then we're gonna have a chat with Barry. I wanted to first see if any of you know a really funny person with a posh British accent, not a fake British accent. I want like a legit Brit. I know a few people, but I'm not naming them yet. If you know somebody who wants to help, I'm doing voice work for the Lawson podcast, guys, where we're doing like a Magnum PI mockumentary. It's going to be hilarious. And I'm a PI lawyer in it, and I need a Higgins. I need a British accent for the Higgins, something very posh. So the other thing I want to do, because this conversation is going to go over any 9 o'clock session I would have had tonight, I want to share an article with you guys really quickly. This is one of the most important articles I've read in a while, and the reason is because it agrees with me, which makes me feel really good. Anytime we get new knowledge that sounds like something we already believe, we just think it's great. So this article that was on Bob Ambrogie's site, it was a guest post by Lee Vickery, is about valuing lots of stuff, not just revenue, not just cash flow, which is a problem with small firms that I write about in the book, but lots of other kinds of capital. So I hope you guys will go read that article. It's really good. All right. With that said, I'm going to turn off Safari so my internet is not angry. So wait a second, because my internet will be angry for a second. And we're going to have a conversation with Barry. So Barry, you did this session that I thought was really interesting. I wanted to avoid war stories and get into principles, but now I'm totally cool with war stories because this is the context for it. So, Barry, we talked about the idea of sort of stumbling through on purpose. Of you've figured out a bunch of things through your experiences, and now you're trying to, instead of us all making the same mistakes over and over again, you were sharing some wisdom, which I think is really important. Again, I read about it in the book. So I hope what you guys watching will do is comment below as Barry's talking any questions you have about things he's tried, any comments about things that you've tried. We'd love to hear it. So Barry, thanks for hanging out with us again.
All right, Mike. All right. So one thing that I do want to point out is I do have a couple of stories queued up, but they're sort of in context with what I was talking about in my session, which is sometimes when you're confronted with situations or you're trying to decide to do something new or try something new, not to be intimidated by the fact that you have to do some things to make some things happen. I have a little mantra: when you do things, things happen. And some of the stories I'm going to tell are not so much to tell a story of this is what I did, because they were a while ago and those things probably couldn't be done now, but things like them could be done. So I want to tell them in the context of, here's some crazy stuff that I did that worked, and some of them in like incredible ways. So when I was about, I don't know, 10, 15 years into my practice, I decided I wanted to make a little more money, and I'm going to kind of talk about in the book Evolutions of a Law Practice. I had done landlord-tenant and real estate. I wanted to make a little more money. I said, I'm going to go into personal injury because I could make more money, which I did. I made some more money, but not life-changing, and I didn't really like it. But I knew a little bit about how to do it from part-time jobs I'd had early on. So my big marketing idea when I started the PI was I put ads in out-of-state bar journals. And I got this idea seeing a couple of New Jersey and Florida lawyers that advertised in the New York. But I decided, let me look across the country and let me come up with a plan that's within my budget. So I had my clerk, my paralegal, my assistant, send away for the bar journals from all 50 states plus Puerto Rico. We looked at them in the ads, and it was kind of interesting if you like that kind of stuff. And I came up with a little plan. And I decided not to do New Jersey or Florida because they were too expensive, and a lot of the New York lawyers were there. And I did Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Texas, Illinois, and California. My budget was about $300 a month. Most of them averaged $30, $40, $50 a month. I said, I'll try it for 6 months. We'll see what happens. Most of them, I got calls, they weren't much. But Pennsylvania was a home run. Not really sure why, but the first week the ad went in, I got a call from a lawyer in Pittsburgh, a pedestrian knockdown, broken leg, Brooklyn, 100 policy, settled for $90,000 3 months later. The guy didn't even want a referral fee. So I made $30,000, enough to pay for the ad for the next 954 years. I then got a call from a lawyer in Philadelphia from the Pennsylvania Bar Journal ad costing $42 a month, who was doing 800 numbers for lawyers, mostly PI lawyers across the country. And he mostly advertised on TBS out of Atlanta. This is like in the early 90s, I believe. He was getting a lot of calls from the Bronx, which Bronx is like plaintiff heaven. And he said to me, do you want these Bronx cases? And I said, sure. But I got to be able to reject the crappy ones. And he said, you can do that. And he was true to his word. He was a lawyer. He knew. I got a lot of big cases from that little thing. Okay, so I do PI. I get busy. Those things and some other things that happened from the ad and from some other things that I did. When I was doing PI, I also decided that I would focus on Queens County. And I kind of branded myself as the Queens guy. So lawyers around the city knew if you had a case in Queens with a conflict, to call Barry Seidel. You wanted somebody to maybe do an appearance or a deposition in Queens, call Barry. Okay. I branded myself a little bit that way. But there was a problem, several problems. One is I didn't really like the work for lots of reasons. I talk about it in the book. It doesn't matter. I didn't like it, even though I was making more money, but money's not everything. But another thing I didn't like was in New York, if your practice could be in 8 contiguous counties, and getting to cover cases in other counties, very, very difficult. You go there for one case, there's a lot of standing around. And I came upon this idea to do court coverage service in Queens County because lawyers didn't like to go to Queens. It's a busy courthouse, whatever. And I came up with a little marketing thing for that, which was different than the other one. It was a direct mail campaign. And this is what I did. The courts had just gone computer, because lawyers are always behind the times. So I had a different clerk at the time, and I had him make a list of lawyers that had just filed for preliminary conferences in Queens County. And I said, make me a list of the plaintiff lawyers, those cases, they just filed. We had a mailing list. These are people that just filed. And I put a little time in. So here's another point I was trying to make in the session was sometimes if you want to do a little activity like this, you got to put in some level of work and thought and trying. You're not going to get paid right away. But if you get an idea and you want to try, put a little thought. So this was my idea. I sent a mailing to 1,350 lawyers over a 6-month period. In the mailing was 3 things. A cover letter that I put a bunch of time in making sure it got the point across. I am in Queens. I know what your problems are. I know what to do. It's reasonably priced. You should give it a try. That's one. 2 was a price list. It was reasonably priced. I priced the preliminary conferences at $75 and everything else at $100. Motions, pretrial conferences, whatever it was. And then the third thing was I had a special Rolodex card. That Rolodex cards were big. Then maybe people now don't know what that is. But on the tabs, everyone had it. The clerks all had it. The secretaries had it. It didn't have my name. The name was below. It said Queens Court Appearances. Okay, so I sent over a 6-month period 1,350 letters, and I got 275 new law firm clients to use me for the PCs and at preliminary conferences. And as I thought, they all started using me for the later appearances, and they all started telling their friends. And the business was a home run. It was a home run from the mailing. I got a 13% return on a direct mail. It might be, it maybe should be in the Guinness Book of World Records. I don't know. Yeah. But it was just, have an idea. I executed it. The business got big. If anyone wants to look, and I'll post it in the notes later, the business is still going, although it's out of business right now. But www.wecoverqueens.com. If you've never seen a business like this, you should check it out. After I did it, a lot of other people came into the business and started doing it. There's 15 lawyers I know that make a living just doing per diem appearances in Queens County. And now there are agencies that do it. Now, right now, court is closed. I haven't done any appearances in a month or two. Zero income. Oh, I did one virtual, which I'm offering the service. They're trying it until they can open. And by the way, courts in Queens are not opening until September. That's my view of it. I mean, I could talk to you about what's going on here in New York City and in Queens, the epicenter. This is a rough thing. The subways and the railroads is a big problem with opening up anything. Yeah. And lawyers, the governor called us non-essential. I don't disagree because I'm cynical. The personal injury cases are non-essential. Sorry, everybody, but they are. Court is kind of going on, but I felt fortunate that I saw that this court appearance business is based on solving a problem for lawyers, which is the inefficiency of the court system. But I knew that at some point things would get more efficient. There'd be more refiling. There'd be more virtual. I just didn't think it was going to happen so soon. But there's an accelerant, and now it's happened. So fortunately, a number of years ago, I started also doing a practice area that I was interested in, which is probate and estate administration. So I want to tell you something interesting. Anyone who hasn't gone and looked at the other conferences or the other sessions that Mike's put together here, I've watched almost all of them, and whatever ones I haven't seen, I'm going to go back and look at. They're terrific, and I've learned a lot. And one of the things that I learned had to do with, I'm sitting here at home, I'm out of business right now on the court appearance side, and I want to say, all right, I'm set up to do probate and estate, and then it dawned on me, holy crap, there's a lot of people died here in the New York area, 10,000, 20 to 30. It's unbelievable. Plus, regular people died too without COVID. Okay, so I know I'm going to be busy, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm so smart. All of my organic articles, my websites, my queensprobate.com blog that years ago got me on page 1 of Google. I said, oh, let me see how I'm doing after listening to one of the guys talked about Google My Business, and right. Google used to be the do no harm company, and now it's kind of like Facebook where it's all about the money. OMG, it was a big shock to me when I went and Googled Queens probate lawyer, where I used to be the man, and I'm on page 3 because I rested on my laurels and I haven't been looking, and I had the court appearance business, and I had enough probate work coming. And so this was a big shock to me. And I wasn't the only lawyer who suddenly placed ads in the time of COVID for probate. Other people have thought of that. Okay, so what did I do? This is 2 weeks ago I'm talking about now. I'm scrambling around to try to figure out how to put a Google ad in, which is like mind-bogglingly complicated. And I got a little ad in, and I'm in the bottom of page 1, top of page 2. I guess I didn't put in enough money. But you know something? I don't really care that much. The calls I'm getting, kind of crappy. Not really stuff that I'm not that keen on doing. And I said, what am I going to do now? I can do the probate. My employee is set up at home. She can do it. I shifted my assistant who was helping me in the court appearance business. She's terrific. I shifted her over to help in the probate side. She wanted to learn it anyway. My marketing strategy is a little bit different. I'm going to market to other lawyers. I'm going to take all my people that I know from the court appearance business, make sure they know that I do the probate. I'm going to put some stuff out there, and I've been getting good calls. And here's something else. when you're doing something generic in a particular area, something like probate, well, it's also like when you take a general thing like personal injury or family law, if you're not differentiating yourselves, it's hard to get there organically. However, some of the stuff that I do and that I actually like better than the day-to-day probate, that's a little more esoteric, you can still get there organically. So when I started doing probate, I came across these cases, these kinship cases that involve distant relatives and inheritances and the public administrator. And they're complicated, but they're interesting, and there's a lot of money in them, and they're fun. And the way most clients were finding their lawyers were these, I'm going to say this nicely now, these scoundrel genealogy companies were scouring the courthouses for newly filed kinship situations and telling the people they found them money and signing them up, and they had in-house lawyers. Well, this is about 5-6 years ago, I figured out that, nowadays, a lot of people getting that mysterious inquiry, you know what they're going to do? They're going to Google that. Right. And I wrote all of these articles about public administrator, cousin cases, and even to this day, there aren't paid ads for those things. If someone Googles that, my stuff comes up. I got a call today. As I was looking at some of them. The probate side, I can't break in, but I don't really want to. The kinship side, the cousin cases side, my stuff's still there. I got a call on like $1 million case today. Because I wasn't running around in court. I spent some time talking to the client about it. Anyway, there's stuff out there, and there's always things to learn. And I always say that to lawyers, young lawyers starting out, people thinking that they're going to make a career change. There's a lot to know, and it's intimidating, but there's a lot to learn. So be curious. Find the stuff out. Every day I find out what I don't know, and I don't say, oh, gosh, I didn't know. I say, boy, I'm glad I'm looking. I'm glad I'm thinking. So that's been interesting. Yeah, I talk a lot. I need some water now.
Well, I was thinking about the book title, which your book is called Evolutions of a Law Practice, and I'm assuming what you mean by that is basically that whatever, if you had pretended that you had a plan when you got out of law school, your life laughed at you and made you come up with other stuff, right? And you had to evolve and just try stuff. So it's sort of, it sounds like, and as I've talked to you, your advice is less, let me give you this very prescriptive thing of exactly what you need to do in your practice, and more, let me show you what happens when you have a habit of experimentation, right?
Yes, and curiosity and kind of following things that you're interested in, and kind of knowing that if you make a mistake or if you have something go a little wrong and it hurts a little bit, so you learn a lesson, you brush yourself off, and you move forward.
Well, I think this current probate thing is an interesting example in that it leads me to a thought. Are you, as you're making these pivots, are you trying to chase the market, which the risk with chasing the market is that the market's going to ping all over the place and take you to all kinds of different practice areas and issues. And if you chase that, you've got switching costs every time of things you've got to learn. And, you're abandoning expertise that you had before and you're just bouncing around. Are you doing that? Or is it more following your own interests? And like you mentioned, you're building up assets as you go, these content assets as you go. What's sort of driving these bounces, through your career?
I, at various times, maybe wasn't pursuing the things for the quote unquote right reasons. And so when I was in the PI field and I went in it for the money, it wasn't a true passion of mine. There were times when I went into things just because I thought I would like it and did it for a while, and I liked it but didn't love it, so I didn't stay with it. Right. This probate and estate stuff, I liked it better than any other area that I had gone into. I went into it, 20, 25 years into my career. I'm practicing since 1982. So when I went into it, I liked it, but I learned and evolved even within it. Also, like with any business, there's kind of three parts of it. And I found over time that I focused and was really good at item one, which is getting the business. I always say getting the business like easier than people think, but 2 and 3 are harder. 2 is getting quality work done under time pressure, or at least under time constraints. And number 3 is dealing with money and financial issues. Over time, I got better at 3. I identified within myself that getting things done efficiently and using things that are out there and getting the flow and process. Another thing that I've came across quite a bit in the sessions here that I've really stepped back in earnest to look at. That's 37 years in practice. I'm still learning to do that better. And it's not a matter of I'm counting widgets, I'm looking at the exact time. I read your book, The Churn. You nailed it, man. I don't want to be in the churn. I want to have a flow that works well and is consistent with who I am and what I want to do. And even like certain little things that I put in, I'm no brain surgeon or brilliant person that invented new things. But the day I said, I don't want to take any more calls on the fly, and I want the policy of my office to be, if someone wants to talk to me on a new matter, or if a client wants to talk to me about a particular thing, it's scheduled appointments. That's it. And I know people have probably been doing that for years and saying, "Oh, what? You just figured that out now?" Well, I'm glad I figured it out now because those kind of things make a big difference.
Yeah. Well, and I point out in the book we're not very good at sharing generational knowledge, right? We're all making the same mistakes over and over again. And the point that you made about, following your interests and keeping, later in your career, do you mind if I tell you read the book, so can I share the cab driver story versus the bus driver thing?
Go for it.
So very briefly, there's a test in England, the knowledge of London's, taxi system, of their road system, because they've got all these ancient roads and little back alleys. And so GPS really sucks for this. And so there's this really hard test called the capital K knowledge. And these cabbies have to take it to be able to, drive around. And it's a very creative exercise because they have to figure out the most efficient route from point A to point Z using very weird, landmarks. It's really hard. The reason this is cool, and the book Peak talks about this, is they studied the brains of these drivers. And what they showed with the cab drivers is that their brains actually grew over time. And this is amazing, right? Because we didn't think that adults have that kind of brain elasticity, but their amygdala was growing. What was interesting about it was then they did the same study on bus drivers who are functionally doing the same thing, right? They're driving people around London. But with the bus drivers, there's nothing creative. It's following the same route every day. And they did a study on that same group, and they showed that their brain was shrinking. So same theoretical exercise, right? You take two lawyers. They're doing the same thing. They're delivering legal services. But all roads point to, and a lot of studies among doctors show this, all roads point to, if you're not creative in your work, you're going to get brain drain, you're going to get worse at it, and your clients are going to suffer. And I'm betting, I'm not going to guess at your age, but I'm betting that this work that you've done, right, it helps you, this shifting helps you to keep your brain active, right, to keep changing and keep challenging yourself. It's healthy. Right?
I don't mind telling you I'm 63 years old. And you know what I decided now that I've been home for 2 months? I was still running around in court, maybe not as much as I did way back when, but a lot. I'm not doing that when court opens. There are other ways of doing it. And I went through periods of time when I wasn't going and I was delegating, but that was a back office challenge and it was almost like not worth it. So I went back. But it's like the craziest thing. One of the little phrases that we use in the court appearance business, and whenever I've written about the per diem business, I always say, and a lot of the other per diem lawyers say this now, bad is good. So things that the court system does to lawyers in practice that are bad, and court systems are notorious for this, at least in New York, but I don't think it's only in New York, where they schedule many conferences at the same time and you wait around and nothing really happens. And it could be done a much more efficient way, but nobody cares. And as a lawyer, you feel a little abused. But okay, it creates an opportunity because lawyers, and this is one of the things in the per diem business, the other problem with coming to a place like Queens, it's hard to get there. You can't park. The subway ride is tedious. There's no place to eat in the building. It's a horror show. So, but lately I've been saying, well, bad is good. Except at a certain point, bad gets so bad that doing it becomes intolerable. And that kind of happened to me. And even though a lot of the lawyers who are home not working now are kind of sad and upset that they're not working, but everybody kind of agreed. It had gotten so hard.
Right.
And it was almost like it was going to be a breaking point.
Yeah, it feels like, I mean, to extrapolate on that bad is good idea, it seems like part of what drove you is if you're looking for an area, a problem you want to solve, a solution you can create, looking for where there's really dumb inefficiencies, right?
Yes.
Where the way people are doing it now, including the courts, when you can look at that and go, really? Right? And you look around at a lot of people and you hear a lot of really energy, like that can be a really good place to go in and fix. But it sounds like at some point, if you can't put a dent in that with your own business and with your own efficiencies and the things you're trying,
Right.
you start to be part of the bad, right? You start to be, drowning in that problem.
Well, in my session, you and I talked a little bit about some idea like this that I think is going to come into play very much now. And lawyers who are going in practice or trying to build practice are probably some of them are going to take me up on this. And that's something called limited scope representation. It's also called unbundled legal services. Right. If you have time, and basically not a lot of people have time, you want to look into something interesting, Google limited scope representation or unbundled legal services and learn a little bit about it, because what this is doing parts of a case for clients for a fixed fee. Now, you got to have strong back office to do this. You got to have payment systems in place.
Really good scoping. You have to have good documents that tell you this is when it's done, right?
Yes, and you have to be clear with the clients. But then, of course, there was the big hurdle that's preventing this from being done. But this is a very solvable problem. The big hurdle is lawyers are afraid to do this because the courts won't let you out of the case if you appear. Yep. And it's a funny thing. In Queens, they have a little sort of public interest thing where they'll allow limited scope representation to representing debtors in debt collection cases for a program from either St. John's or Hofstra Law School, where a professor comes in with the students and they conference the cases. They don't go to trial. They conference the cases and they file a limited scope appearance. So I went to the chief judge. You should be letting regular lawyers do this. I said, you know what happens with these cases? I conference those cases sometimes with the kids, and they do a good job. They're trying hard. Then the case goes upstairs for trial, and the client says to them, "Are you coming with me?" "Sorry, not allowed." And they're going up in the elevator with me, and I'm there as the plaintiff representing some evil credit card company. And I'm going to try the case. By the time we get upstairs, they're quaking, and the case is settled. Now, there are going to be, when they take off the ban on evictions in New York, there's going to be tens of thousands of housing court cases with pro se people. Somebody could go in there and just basically do limited scope representation. Most housing court cases, you can settle them on one appearance. Is that true every time? No.
Well, I think we talked about this in Travis County. We had this same situation in Travis County, especially with a lot of family law cases. There was just a huge backlog of family law cases. And so what the family bar did there with this judge problem was to go and petition these judges basically to say, we want to do these limited scope things, but we're freaked out you won't let us go. Look at what it's doing to consumers for us not to be able to do that. And it was actually the judges. The judges changed the local rules so that when I get onto a case, I can file as a lawyer. I can file a document that basically says, this is what the client has paid me for. Mm-hmm. This is when we're done. And the judges are required to let you go. So it is a good complaint to say, I'm worried judges won't let me off, but it's not an unsolvable complaint.
Yes.
Like you can go chase that down.
Yes. And there are also situations, and we talked about this, where clients can pay you, they can be pro se, but pay a lawyer to help them. And you can make a written agreement with the client and do that. I was thinking of doing limited scope representation in surrogates court where the probate cases are. When you go up to Queens Surrogates Court or any surrogates court in New York to try to file as a lawyer, you have to wait online because they don't all have e-filing. Now they do because there's a crisis. So you could e-file everywhere in surrogates. Why they couldn't before, I don't know. Seriously. So here's what would happen. You'd go up there as a lawyer with your papers, and there's a room full of people waiting to see the clerk in the administration department. So there's cases with no wills. And there's a certain kind of case in New York, a small estate under $50,000, everyone's pro se. Man, it takes them forever to file those papers in court. I usually end up leaving.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, there's
Well, we
lots of
had the
opportunities.
same. Yeah, we had the same thing in Texas, and you know, it. I saw. It's funny that you say this because I'm in a bunch of Facebook groups with lawyers, and I saw somebody got into the family law Facebook group, and they said, "What are you guys pricing uncontested divorces at? I want to get my feet wet in this area, and this seems like a good place to start." And the thread that followed of lawyers saying there's no such thing as an uncontested divorce,
Oh,
you can't
please.
do pro se assistance because they're just going to screw it up and the judge is going to hunt down your children. You like there was just so many can'ts. You can't do everything's so negative, and it was all driven by these lawyers believing that there's something really really special,
Yes.
and to that consumer, that product is not very special. The reason they don't want to pay very much for it is because that outcome isn't worth the cost to them. And
Right.
so, unless you can figure out a product that or a service that matches their demand, you're just screaming at clouds, right? I see so many lawyers yelling at the old man yelling at clouds thing, who are like, no, they need to understand how much I'm worth, and it's like you're just not. I mean, you don't
Well,
have to do these services, to be clear. If you don't
yes.
want to do these kinds of, I'm just trying to get a case up to mediation. But if you do want to figure out how to solve problems for a certain audience, figure out what they need, turn it into a defined scope, productize it, and then help them. And if the rules don't allow you to do that, then go push to change the rules.
I'm putting that stuff out there for people that want an area to try where you can generate some income and find out
Sure.
what you like. And you know what? You may do that for a while. You're going to improve your legal skills so much, and your opportunities will open to go do other things. But these are things that people can jump into very easily.
Yeah,
There's a huge
Jessica.
demand.
Jessica in the comments said, I saw that post. I mean, it was all over. There were countless comments. And what was fascinating about that with all those, you can't, you can't, you can't, I typed a response at one point and I was like, yes, you can. I did it a bunch.
Yeah.
I can't believe you guys are all saying this. And I went back and I deleted it because I just did not want the scream fest that was going to happen to me on Facebook when I'm like, no, you actually can do these things
Yeah,
differently.
it's like when you post a political
I
comment
know.
because you just couldn't take it anymore, and then you realize, why did I do
Just
that?
delete it. I spend most of my
Yep.
time deleting things I say on Facebook.
You
But
know, related to what we're talking about here, and I'll throw this out there
yeah,
for people to think about. There is a reason why LegalZoom and Avo, well, not so much, but LegalZoom's spending tens of thousands, millions of dollars
right.
to go for a particular market with a particular service. And a lot of lawyers and a lot of jurisdictions and a lot of bar associations, they have this knee-jerk reaction to it. They try to stop them. And every time a bar association tries to stop them when it goes to court, the bar associations lose. And they lose because LegalZoom is offering something that people need. But lawyers should be looking at, why is that happening? First of all, it's a huge market if LegalZoom is going for it. And the reason why, let's put it on the wills side, okay? So why are people willing to go and do a will, a very important thing? They're willing to do it on their own and take a chance and not hire a lawyer. Why? Does not speak very well of us because they don't trust us generally as one, but because they also perceive that we're going to charge them $2,500 or $5,000 for something that they can get on LegalZoom for $280. Guess what? If you're efficient, if you run your office right, you can be profitable and you do not have to charge $2,500 to do a will. And it even pays if it's not super duper duper profitable to do a will for somebody for $750 or $950 or $1,000 or $1,250 to do it, because those wills come back as estates a certain percentage of the time. And by the way, the percentage of time that they come back, that's part of your marketing and your business too.
Right.
You know, the greatest compliment that you can get as a lawyer is some family member of some will that you did calls you, and you never met them, and they called you and they say, my father spoke very highly of you. That means you did a good job. I say to myself, I did a good job. That client trusted me enough that he told his kids. And so those things are out there to do. And I keep coming back to this. Think about what things are LegalZoom doing, all this business formation stuff. Yeah. A lot of it is really simple. But if you're a lawyer that does business formation issues and lease negotiations and things where a client is going to get it cut rate done at LegalZoom. Okay, sometimes it's appropriate, but you know what? If you're giving somebody value, they should be coming to you as a lawyer. It's on us as lawyers that people are not thinking of us that way.
Yeah, I mean, I want to put a huge caveat on this and say some of this is driven by business model. And what I mean by that is there are certain kinds of lawyers. I can't remember which session it was that the person said, you can't be both Ruth's Chris and McDonald's, right?
Yes.
That doesn't mean you can't be McDonald's, and it doesn't mean you can't be Ruth's Chris. It's just really hard to do both. There are certain kinds of practices, expert-driven practice, super elite. You're trying to build on that eliteness that if you go start doing $750 limited scope probate things, it totally undermines your business model. So think very, very carefully about that. But if you're the other kind of lawyer that's a service company, you're trying to deliver services, you've got to get to the point where you figure out what's good enough to solve the demand. And the next question is, once you identify that demand, what's good enough, what's required for it, then say, okay, can I deliver that profitably? Because you have no moral obligation to do a service that you can't deliver profitably. I'm totally against that idea. So there's business model questions that you have to figure out first, but then once you figure that out, you can really come up with a lot of solutions.
I totally agree. You can't be McDonald's and Ruth's Chris. And I guess maybe I've been more of a McDonald's type of lawyer my whole career.
And I'm tired of people saying that's shameful. Like, that's good.
But you know something? And if you have a skill that's at a high level, don't do the little stuff. Yeah. But you got to have a business plan that suits what you do.
And you got to earn that. You got to if you're doing McDonald's level work and then turning around to people I see this all the time. This drives me nuts. If you're doing McDonald's level work, you can't turn to consumers and say, no, dummy, you don't get to call me whenever you want to. I'm super elite. I'm hiding from you. Whichever you want to do, whether you want the benefits of accessibility or you want the benefits of expertise, you just got to go earn it. Just do the method and earn it.
Yeah, and with the benefit of hindsight, there was because I started right out of school and was sort of self-taught, I put myself in the place where I was doing that sort of, streetwise stuff. It suited me. It suited my personality. But at a certain point, and I think that's why I evolved into the probate and estate stuff, and why even like the lower end probate stuff, I wasn't so interested in it either. I kind of like the more interesting cases where sometimes if I'm in a kinship case and lawyers are dabbling in it, I used to be someone who dabbled in areas. I try not to. What I'll do at the beginning of a case, if there's 5 other lawyers in the case and I'm the one who really knows how to do this case now, I call them up and I say, listen, we're not adverse to each other here. Let me tell you how these cases work. I don't say it in a way that I wouldn't want to hear myself. And I put together the team and we get the cases done. And I have to say, it does feel good to practice at a higher level and do some things. We all have a little of that going. But everybody's jumping in at a different level.
Well, and I would point out both approaches are creative, right? Whether what you're doing as McDonald's, whether what you're doing is creating solutions, that's creative work. Like that uses your brain. You might be, like what Erin Levine has done with Hello Divorce. You may criticize that as, oh, that's LegalZoom or whatever, but she's done some really cool work to figure out how can I make this work for people? How do I access people? How do I make it accessible for them and exciting for them? She's doing really creative work. The other kind of lawyer that's super focused on a problem and that they're really nerdy and digging into this problem, they're doing creative work too. What I hate, and this I think really drives home this point that you're making, I hate to see people think they have to do both. I hate when people think I'm supposed to do deep work in a basement, super smart, and also be available by text all the time. It's like, that is just brain conflict, right? I mean, the cost to lawyers is huge on that. It looks like I just lost Barry. Jessica, I did want to say you're in the session now. Oh, look, it says Ask Twinsies. Jessica, you're in here. I did want to, related to something that Barry just said, I think you need to take your the opposing counsel on your new cases out to lunch. That really helps. Can you guys hear as I'm trying to call Barry back on Skype? He's got that New York internet. He says he's not online. Anyway, so we'll see if Barry pops back on. In the meantime, I just wanted to talk about a couple of other things that Barry had talked about in his session that I hope you guys will go listen to. He really talked about this habit of doing things, of just going out and trying things that you haven't done before. I hope that you'll get into that habit. And again, relative to the book, I hope that what you'll do is figure out, as you're doing this experimentation, one of the things I hope you'll try is figuring out, do you want to be the deep expert kind of lawyer, or do you want to be the kind of lawyer that's doing, building the audiences? And so I mentioned this in a podcast I was on earlier. I keep making this distinction now between Megan Xavier and Aaron Levine, because I think their two businesses are really interesting. But in the case of Megan, she asked me at some point, she said, well, which should I be? Should I become the deep expert lawyer, or should I become the audience builder? And I said, a conversation, Seth Godin makes a really interesting distinction. He says, entrepreneurs make decisions and freelancers make stuff. And I'm applying that distinction to this choice of, do I want to be the expert kind of lawyer, or do I want to be the sort of entrepreneurial solutions lawyer? Question is, do you want, just think of the next 2 weeks of your life. Would you rather spend that time managing people or writing a book? And I love that question, because people tend to either be one or the other. They either really hate managing people and would much rather write a book. That was Megan. She didn't want to have a big team. She didn't want to have a bunch of people. We talked to Todd Smith the other day on one of these late night check-ins, and he was the same way. He did not want to have it. He tried it. He went and got a team and he started growing. He didn't want to do that. And so he focused more on I want to write a book, that kind of business. And so now he's built his business more like a consultancy, more like, and I gave you the example of Megan the same way. Megan added this. I hope you guys will reach out to Megan, because this is really smart. She created a subscription product for law firms. She's an ethics lawyer. And so a lot of these lawyers, obviously they don't have an ethics department like these big firms do. They don't have an ethics hotline that you can go call. And so what she did was a subscription service where people can reach out to her. These lawyers pay her monthly to be able to reach out to her and ask her ethics questions. Really cool way to sell her brain. But that's what a consultancy would do, right? That's not what Erin Levine is doing. Erin Levine is doing the opposite. She's trying to get things out of her brain. She's trying to make it rely on the system, on this process. And on other people. So again, I think it's really helpful when you start asking yourself this question. Ask yourself, would I rather write a book or manage people? If I'd rather write a book, I might be able to do this expert business. If I'd rather manage people, I think I should scale and grow in that way. So it looks like I've lost Barry. I hope that you guys will go back and watch his session. I'm going to follow up with him and make sure that he joins the comments below. If you guys want to share any ideas of things that you're trying, especially now, I keep encouraging you, post them in the comments below. Barry can come in and offer crazy off-the-wall ideas, things that he's tried. I love the direct mail thing, because my dad was in direct mail forever, and it kind of went away, which means it's actually really cheap exposure right now. There are far fewer things in the mail. Go counter-cycle. If everybody's doing Facebook ads, it might be a good time to try direct mail. I know that sounds crazy. If everybody else is off billboards, maybe it's a good time to try billboard. Just give it a shot, just something, knowing that it might not work. The other thing I wanted to mention to you, I think you can see it. I think I'm pointing the right. I don't think I'm pointing the right way. On Sunday, Nick and I do these Ask Twinsies sessions where we give terrible advice about whatever the heck you want to talk about. If you will post on social media, on Twitter or Facebook, or whatever the kids are doing with their ticks and their talks, we can answer those questions. We answered everything from, we talked about twerking and being taken seriously. We talked about minestrone. We talked about terrible. We gave awful advice. So I hope you guys will submit some questions. We'll see you on Sunday. I'll follow up with you guys tomorrow. Again, remember, follow up with Barry. I know he's going to be mad at his technology. Remember, hashtag not a tech conference. Y'all have a good night.